Canterlot lay in ruins in the valley below the mountain it had once rested upon. Amid the rubble were personal items once belonging to the most aristocratic of ponies, furniture, fixtures, artwork, clothing, and bodies. So many bodies. 3 ponies stood just on the outskirts of the worst of it, while another flew overhead. Rarity, Cheerilee, and Applebloom went from looking at what was left of the once grand city and castle to watching Derpy as she surveyed from above.
"Anything?"
called up a disheveled Cheerilee.
"No."
Derpy called back sadly.
"Nothing."
She cupped her hooves to her mouth and called again.
"Hello? Can anypony hear me?"
Rarity shook her head. Sadness settled deep into her blue eyes.
"This is absolutely dreadful. Fancy pants, floor, all of the friends I made in Canterlot, all gone."
Turning away from the mess, Applebloom looked out across the valley in the direction of Ponyville. It was smoking, and the sky above it was nothing more than a black mass. Tears that had stemmed temporarily flowed freely once more. Cheerilee slid a hoof around her withers and pulled her close.
"It's going to be all right, Applebloom,"
Cheerilee cooed.
"What if I didn't make it?"
the little filly sobbed.
"What if I never see any pony in my family again? What if I never see Scootaloo or Sweetie Belle again?" "Don't say that!"
Rarity's voice was loud and sharp. She looked down at Applebloom with a half-crazed expression.
"Sweetie Belle is alive! She has to be!"
Lowering her head to whisper into Applebloom's ear, Cheerilee added,
"And so is your family. We'll find them."
Derpy landed and tucked her wings into her sides, looking defeated.
"There's no movement anywhere. If they fell with all this, there's no way any pony could have survived."
She gave a slight shudder, and when she spoke, her voice was small.
"I don't want to stay here."
"Where do you suggest we go?"
snapped Rarity.
"Surely you can't be thinking of going back to Ponyville."
"I don't know,"
Derpy answered with a frown.
"I just think we should move. Something tells me we shouldn't stay in one place for too long."
"Derpy's right,"
Cheerilee agreed.
"If we head north, we'll reach the Canadian border. Some pony there will be able to tell us if this is more widespread, or if it's just Ponyville and Canterlot."
She took note of the way Rarity was looking at her, and fixed her eyes directly on the unicorn.
"If you have any better suggestions, I would be open to hearing them."
"Canada? You've got to be joking."
"Like I said, better suggestions."
When Rarity stayed silent for a few moments, Cheerilee gave a nod.
"Then it's north we go. Derpy, would you mind scouting ahead so we know what we're walking into?"
"You got it."
The gray Pegasus took to the air once more, hovering just a few feet off the ground.
"You know what I've noticed? There aren't any other Pegasi in the air anywhere from what I can see."
Cheerilee glanced back at Ponyville and the black void above it.
"Maybe we're just not looking in the right places. Come on, let's go."
With Derpy acting as the lookout, the other 3 followed on hoof beneath her. The destruction of Canterlot was so great and widespread that there were times that the 3 walking had to climb over giant portions of the castle wall, stone and wood. Poor Applebloom was already so emotionally drained that it didn't take long for her body to grow weary as well. Though Cheerilee offered to carry her, it was Derpy who ended up with the little filly on her back. She was used to flying around with Dinky, and Applebloom didn't weigh much more than she did. Plus, Derpy admitted, it made her feel a little less anxious. With the added weight, she could almost pretend her daughter was with her, and safe. When the 2 of them were alone on the ground, Cheerilee gave Rarity a stern side-eye.
"Rarity, I understand you're worried about your sister and your friends, but that gives you no excuse to snap at either Derpy or Applebloom like you did."
"Don't use your teacher voice on me, Cheerilee. We were in school together, remember? We've known each other since we were little fillies. The intimidation factor doesn't work on me."
"I'm not trying to intimidate you, Rarity."
"My baby sister is out there, possibly all on her own. Possibly."
The unicorn couldn't bring herself to finish her thought.
"I know,"
Cheerilee said, her tone softening slightly.
"but you're not the only one worried about loved ones. Applebloom has her family. Derpy has her daughter. Don't you think I'm worried about each and every one of my students?"
"Oh, please."
Rarity hefted herself up and over a rather large chunk of rock.
"You see them for what, 5, 6 hours a day?"
Cheerilee narrowed her eyes as she followed after Rarity.
"Yes? What's your question?"
"Students and family are not one and the same.
The earth pony jumped to the ground from the top of the rock and looked at Rarity with a carefully blank expression.
Spend that much time with some pony and tell me they don't become family to you.
She took a step closer to Rarity, her eyes narrowing again.
I forget how mean-spirited you can be, you know that. Diamond Tiara always did remind me of some pony, and I could never put a hoof on it. It's all coming back to me now. All those days in school when you were horrid to every pony and fooled our teacher with your precious little act.
Like you were Little Miss Sunshine and Daisies.
Above, Apple Bloom was looking down at the two mares arguing. She heaved a quiet sigh and moved to rest her head on Derpy's back. One golden eye glanced back at the filly, and Derpy asked,
You okay?
They're fighting down there.
Some ponies don't handle crisis well.
Apple Bloom nodded, frowning to herself. Derpy? Ain't you scared?
Of course I am. But letting it get the best of me isn't going to accomplish anything, is it?
Her wall-eyed gaze swept the landscape slowly as she flew, taking in everything so she could lead the two below on the easiest path.
I choose to believe that Dinky is with some pony who will take care of her. I know she's all right in my heart, just like I know that your family's all right.
How can you possibly be so bubbly and optimistic? I've never been so scared in my whole life.
Well, they don't call me Bubblecup for nothing.
Blinking in confusion, Apple Bloom lifted her head, her little brow furrowed. Ponies call you Bubblecup?
Well, they used to. Only Raindrops does now. That's my name, you know.
Apple Bloom's voice softened. I didn't know. Every pony always calls you Derpy. The gray Pegasus shrugged.
I was given that nickname in flight school. My first time out by myself, I got into a bit of trouble and had a pretty bad accident. See, even before my eyes were like this, I've always been clumsy. Then after the accident, some ponies started calling me Derpy, and it just kind of stuck.
Though she couldn't be seen by the mare, Apple Bloom's expression was one of horror. That's horrible! Why would you let some pony call you something so mean if it wasn't your name?
It wasn't meant to be mean, and I wasn't offended.
She giggled.
My eyes were Derpy after all.
Careful not to throw the Pegasus off balance or knock herself off, Apple Bloom snaked her forelegs around Derpy's neck and squeezed gently. Can I call you Bubblecup? The male mare felt a surge of emotion at the embrace, and the tenderness in Apple Bloom's voice, and when she spoke it was hard to keep her own voice steady.
I'd really like that, Apple Bloom.
She flew on feeling somehow lighter, despite the brevity of the entire situation. It had been many years since anyone besides her best friend had called her by her given name. Hearing it from the lips of the filly on her back made her realize how much she missed it. There was no ill will toward her nickname or any pony who used it when addressing her, but there was a new desire in her now to have ponies know her for who she truly was, and not just for the way her eyes were never focused in the same direction at once.
Hello, Derpy. Can you not hear us up there?
Both Apple Bloom and the male mare looked down to see Rarity scowling up at them. Her name is Bubblecup!
Excuse me?
Apple Bloom held tight as they descended and jumped to the ground when they'd landed. Her name ain't Derpy. It's Bubblecup. Ponies have been calling her by the wrong name all this time. Cheerily blinked.
Is that true?
Bubblecup smiled shyly.
It's all right. You didn't know.
Well, we know now,
said the earth pony.
Derpy, Bubblecup, whatever.
Rarity huffed impatiently.
When will we pass all of this rubble?
Soon. If we keep heading in this direction down the mountain path, we'll come to a more open area.
Cheerily looked north, squinting in the light of the setting sun.
Did you see any pony?
When Bubblecup shook her head, Cheerily frowned.
We only have 2 more hours of daylight at best. There's no way we'll make it to the border before then. We're going to have to find a good place to make camp for the night soon.
I'm sorry, did you say camp?
Everyone looked at Rarity.
I do not camp. I require 1,000 thread couch sheets and down pillows. I do not sleep in the dirt with only the stars for a blanket.
Stepping close to Rarity, Cheerily smiled sweetly at her.
Oh, Rarity, you won't have to sleep in the dirt.
I won't.
Of course not. I'm sure there'll be plenty of grass for us to use.
Giggling, she started ahead once more with Bubblecup and Apple Bloom close behind, both snickering. Rarity growled and blew the mane from her face, huffing after them. Raindrops flew over Big Macintosh as he tore across the open valley below. Neither of them had any idea where they were going, but they knew they had to keep moving. Bad things happened to ponies who stayed still for too long. They witnessed this when they'd come across Golden Harvest. Just remembering her state of mind and what he had to do gave Big Mac the shudders, and he bore down, pushing himself on just a bit harder. Maybe if he ran faster, he could leave the dreadful memory behind him.
Big Macintosh!
He looked up and realized Raindrops was no longer there. He skidded to a stop, tearing up the ground beneath his hooves. The yellow Pegasus hung over the edge of a cloud, her face drawn with exhaustion.
I'm sorry. I have to stop for a minute.
How's your leg?
It hurts. It's going up my withers and into my wing.
The stallion shook his head.
Sounds like you tore a muscle, too. Come on down and let me take a look.
Slowly and somewhat clumsily, Raindrops descended and landed with an uncertain hop. Big Macintosh gave her injured leg a once-over before looking at her wing.
Tell me if it hurts.
He touched his nose to her withers and put gentle pressure on it. All it took was hearing her sharp intake of air to know it was tender.
All right, no more flying for you. At least not for a while, anyway.
How else am I going to keep up with you?
In answer, he lowered his body and glanced behind him. Interpreting his actions correctly made Raindrop shake her head violently. Her cheeks reddened and she gave a little nervous laugh.
No, I can't do that.
Look, it ain't like any pony's gonna see you, and even if they did, it wouldn't matter. The more you fly, the more damage you're doing to yourself. Now climb on so we can get the hay out of here.
When she didn't move, Big Macintosh looked at her with flattened ears.
Either you get on up or I'm leaving you here.
With a small whine, the Pegasus hoisted herself up onto his back and hung on to the yoke around his neck. When she was situated, he took off running once more. There was no way he would have left her alone. No, Big Macintosh would have stayed with her and tried his best to protect her. But having two little sisters taught him that sometimes a bluff, if it was big enough, could get him what he wanted. He lost track of how long they'd been moving and how much distance they'd covered. Only when his legs started aching did he realize they hadn't stopped in a very long time. They needed to find water and shelter soon. Night was pressing in, and he did not want to be out in the open and vulnerable. Raindrops was in no condition to fly for any length of time, but he was considering having her fly up just a bit to see if she could spot water or a place to spend the night. He ran up the slope of a hill and slowed to a stop at the crest.
I gotta take a minute,
he panted. His tongue felt heavy and sticky in his mouth. Maybe stopping wasn't the best idea. After so many hours of non-stop use, the brief moment they'd paused had his muscles beginning to seize up on him.
Big Macintosh,
Raindrops whispered by his ear.
Look.
With a hoof, she pointed out toward the direction they were going. Down the slope and back out onto the flat ground, he saw what Raindrops had. A mustard-colored pony and a bigger lavender-coated pony. Both lay prone on the ground, no movement and no sign of life.
Hang on.
Ignoring the protesting of his body, Big Mac headed down the slope at a trot. Nearest to them was the smaller of the two bodies. Closer now, they both saw the small horn poking through the disheveled turquoise mane.
Snails?
Raindrops hopped down to nose the body and look for signs of life.
Careful,
Big Mac warned quietly.
Remember what happened with Golden Harvest.
He looked toward the other pony and felt his heart sink. The late-day breeze blew the navy mane of the second pony around, flashes of purple and brilliant pink blending in.
Oh, no.
He lumbered over to the body of Twilight Sparkle and sat, sadness on his face. It was almost as bad as finding one of his sisters. The unicorn before him had become like family over the past few years of knowing her, and to see her like this was hard to take.
He's alive!
Big Mac looked back toward Raindrops.
Say what?
He's alive! He's still breathing!
This gave the stallion hope. He got to his hooves and lowered his head to be near Twilight's mouth. Sure enough, there was breath.
Twilight?
He nudged her body gently with his muzzle.
Twilight, can you hear me?
One purple eye opened slightly and fixed on the red stallion. Recognition set in, and both eyes opened wide.
Big Macintosh?
As if she'd only been resting her eyes, she quickly got up and threw her hooves around him in the tightest embrace she could manage.
Oh my gosh, it's really you! Snails, it's okay!
The skinny colt opened his eyes and let out a laugh.
Good. I don't know how much longer I could have held it in. All her poking was tickling me.
What in the hay is going on here?
Twilight pulled back and shook her knotted mane from her face.
We heard you coming and thought you might be one of them, so we were playing dead. We found out they only like you if you're alive, or if they think you're alive.
Who? Raindrops asked. Twilight looked at her with wide eyes.
Them.
Big Macintosh frowned.
You're gonna have to give us more than that, Twilight.
They're ponies, but not.
she said in a quiet tone, watching as snails and the limping raindrops joined them.
It's like they've gone completely feral and insane.
The stallion and the Pegasus exchanged a look that was not unseen by Twilight.
You've seen them.
Came across Golden Harvest.
Big Mac said reluctantly.
She came right after us.
Twilight touched a hoof to his withers.
You did what you had to do, Big Macintosh. It's them or us now.
You said y'all figured out if you play dead, they'd leave you alone. So you had a run-in too?
Now it was Snails and Twilight who shared a knowing glance.
I teleported us out of Ponyville,
said Twilight solemnly.
Carmel and Cloud Kicker were with us. Both of them turned on us. First Carmel. We were going along and he started acting weird. Then he attacked Snails, trying to bite him and kick him. He bit Cloud Kicker before he got really crazy. His eyes turned completely black and he was coming at us, trying to kill us. We could see it in his face.
Twilight's eyes filled with tears.
It was Cloud Kicker who managed to take him down and stop him. But she was feeling off too, so she told me to take care of her before it fully set in.
Tears trickled down her face.
I had to do it.
She looked up at Big Macintosh.
I didn't have a choice.
He reached out with a strong foreleg and pulled her into a brotherly embrace.
It's all right,
he muttered. It was hard to think of it. He'd known Caramel for a good many years now. The smaller stallion wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but he had always been a good friend. Now to think of him gone, it wasn't a good feeling.
We came across a few others,
Snails said soberly after a few seconds.
Twilight got the idea of playing dead. They sniffed at us, nosed at us, and then moved on.
Raindrop shook her head.
Do we know what's happened to them? What happened in Ponyville? How we all ended up out here? Where here even is?
Twilight sniffled and dried her eyes.
Something attacked Ponyville. Something the princess saw coming, just too late.
Say what now?
Spike got a letter from Princess Celestia the exact same time the first void opened up over Ponyville. The letter said to get ponies into groups of 3 or 4 and to make sure there was an Earth pony, a Pegasus, and a unicorn in each group. That something terrible was coming.
Big Macintosh frowned.
So she knew it was coming?
Yes, but not before there was time to do anything about it.
I remember,
said Raindrops.
We had Amethyst Star with us.
What happened to her?
Twilight asked.
I don't know.
They all fell silent for a moment, each taking in what was shared and drawing their own conclusions. Though Big Macintosh had one more question.
So, why the groups of 3 different ponies?
Twilight's lips pursed as she swallowed.
In case we have to start over?
Raindrops blushed profusely and Snails gave a nervous giggle. Only Big Mac and Twilight remained serious as they looked at one another.
Well, I reckon we best keep moving then. If we're all still alive, then I'm willing to bet there are more of us out there somewhere.
He glanced at Raindrops.
Say, Twilight, how good's your healing magic?
As the day wore on, the bedraggled group of mares were close to coming to blows. 2 of them, at any rate. They were all tired, sore, and extremely thirsty. For this reason, and this reason alone, Bubblecup was in the air once again, though all she wanted to do was get some good rest. She left the group on occasion to fly ahead, though she always returned fairly quickly. The warm summer air was cooling in the setting of the sun, and she longed for a fire to curl up beside and sleep. But they needed water, and she was not going to rest until some was found. On her 9th foray out away from the group, she felt a breeze that was cooler than the air around her. This woke her up just a bit more, and she pressed on. Passing through the clouds, Bubblecup finally came to a lake that was clear and glittering in the fading light. As she flew back to her group, her heart was lighter than it had been all day.
I found water!
She dropped down to land in front of the other 3 with a joyous smile.
It's up ahead, maybe 3 miles.
Oh, thanks, Celestia!
Rarity bolted ahead, ignoring the order to wait from Cheerilee.
It's okay.
Bubblecup laughed.
I didn't see any other ponies. Nothing dangerous.
She swished her tail playfully at Applebloom, eliciting a grin.
I'll race you!
You're on! Applebloom reared back and pawed at the air before shooting ahead like a little yellow bullet, Bubblecup close behind. All Cheerilee could do was sigh and shake her head, smiling slightly. With a quiet laugh of her own, she ran after them. It was funny how just the promise of water could make them all feel that much better. Something cool to drink, a bath, then maybe a fire and some rest. They'd have to take turns, keeping watch in shifts, but they could all finally get some sleep. Maybe in the morning, they'd get some answers to the multitude of questions they each had. Cheerilee caught up with Applebloom and Bubblecup quickly and joined in with their little race, all three of them laughing together. But Cheerilee, ever watchful, soon stopped laughing.
Where is Rarity?
The three of them slowed to look around. Rarity was a fast runner, but not so fast as she could possibly be that far ahead of them. Without prompting, Bubblecup took to the sky to have a look around.
Oh, she should have stayed with us.
Cheerilee muttered.
Now we have to waste time looking for her instead of...
She was cut off promptly by Applebloom shoving a hoof in her mouth. The other hoof was pointing straight ahead. Rarity was there, but she was no longer running. In fact, she was standing very still. Confused, Cheerilee looked at the unicorn to find she was staring off farther ahead. When the earth pony followed her gaze, she suddenly understood everything. The lake was now in sight, but it appeared they were not the only ones drawn to the water. Near the edge, with her back to them, was a light blue earth pony with a darker blue mane and tail. Bubblecup dropped from the sky and spoke in a rushed whisper.
It's Bluebonnet. I swear she wasn't there just a few minutes ago. She looks
sick,
Cheerilee finished, pulling Applebloom's hoof from her mouth. The mare had gashes in her sides and legs, her mane and tail all tangled. But it was her eyes that gave them all a pause. Even as far away as they were, they could tell something was off.
Rarity!
Cheerilee hissed.
Get back here!
No movement, no form of acknowledgement from the unicorn. Bubblecup and Cheerilee looked at each other.
What should we do?
Asked the Pegasus. But Rarity was answering the question for them. Her chin lifted, her chest out and proud, she started for the lake without looking back. The three behind her had no time to yell out a warning. Bluebonnet saw the unicorn and turned.
Good day,
Rarity greeted in her warmest, friendliest voice.
I see we are not the only ponies looking for water. Tell me, are you all alone out here?
Bluebonnet lowered her head and growled like a wild animal. It stopped Rarity in her tracks. Her ears went back and she blinked.
I'm terribly sorry if you feel we are intruding, but my companions and I have been walking all day, and we are in desperate need of...
Bluebonnet squared her withers and pawed the ground.
Rarity!
No one needed to tell her to run. Bluebonnet began to charge, and Rarity turned on the spot to get away. Cheerilee thought fast and shoved Applebloom toward Bubblecup.
Take her and go!
I can't leave you!
Bubblecup protested.
Go before it's too late!
She helped Applebloom onto Bubblecup's back. Then Cheerilee found herself running right beside Rarity, Bluebonnet close behind.
I'm sorry,
Rarity wailed.
I know I've been dreadful.
Yes, you have.
Cheerilee agreed.
But now is not the time. On my mark, turn left. Ready? Now!
Rarity banked left and Cheerilee turned right, the two splitting off into separate directions. Uncertain what to do, Bluebonnet hesitated for only a moment before chasing after Cheerilee. Seeing she was no longer being pursued, Rarity dug her hooves in and came to a quick halt, only to turn around and double back to chase after Bluebonnet. High above, Bubblecup and Applebloom were helpless to watch the chase. As her hooves sped over the ground, Cheerilee felt every single one of her years of having the soft job of teaching. Her body was not out of shape really, but she was definitely not in shape either. Bluebonnet was getting closer and closer with every stride, and soon Cheerilee knew she would be taken over. At least she knew Applebloom was safe. At least those with families would have time to get away. There was a thundering of hooves now that didn't belong to either herself or her pursuer.
Rarity!
Cheerilee spat.
Get out of here!
The hoof beats came faster and heavier, and suddenly there was a great sound of impact behind her. Bluebonnet made a sound like a wail and was gone. Swiveling her head around, Cheerilee saw Big Macintosh standing where he'd run headfirst into Bluebonnet.
Keep running,
he ordered, and so she did.
Cheerilee! Rarity! Over here!
The earth pony looked toward the sound of a familiar voice, and saw Twilight and the rest of the unicorn's party waving her over. She got there quickly and was embraced by Twilight.
Are you all right?
The unicorn asked.
Were you bitten?
No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Twilight!
Rarity hugged Twilight tightly.
Rarity, are you okay?
Okay is definitely not the word I would use.
Cheerilee looked back toward Big Macintosh. Bluebonnet was getting to her feet, recovering from being punted down the field.
What is he doing?
Cheerilee asked in a panic.
We have to go help him!
No!
Twilight trotted around Cheerilee and stood in front of her, making the earth pony meet her gaze.
Don't look! No pony look!
Raindrops took off into the sky, her wing feeling much better thanks to Twilight. She gave Bubblecup a quick embrace, then led her higher for the three of them to rest on a cloud and well out of sight until they were told it was safe to come back down. Bluebonnet opened her mouth as she staggered to her hooves, panting. Blood drooled out between her teeth and onto the ground. Her black eyes locked onto Big Macintosh, and she charged. The stallion held his ground, sizing her up until she moved. When she started for him, he kicked himself into gear and ran right for her. They collided with a heavy thud, Big Macintosh kicking at his forelegs and making contact with her body. This hindered her, but only for a minute. Then she was trying to get at him again, snapping, trying to get her teeth into his flesh. She threw her full weight against him, and Big Macintosh took it, rolling to his back and getting his hind legs under her stomach. With a mighty heave, he kicked out and sent her flying. She landed with a crack, and Big Macintosh hurried to his hooves. Before she could get up again, he reared up and brought his front hooves down on her skull. The sound was not missed by anyone on the ground, and the little Rarity had been able to eat all day came back up in a flash. Twilight was the one to glance and see Big Macintosh slowly making his way over to them.
Are you all right?
She asked trepidly. He nodded, but the Lavender Unicorn still gave him a quick once-over to be sure.
Come on, let's get you to the lake so you can clean yourself up.
Cheerily,
he said wearily.
Rarity, good to see you both.
Despite the blood on his hooves and forelegs, Cheerily gave the stallion a tight embrace.
Thank you, Big Macintosh. If you hadn't been there...
Glad to help.
Releasing him, Cheerily smiled.
Applebloom will be so glad to see you.
This made the stallion's ears perk slightly.
Wait, she's here?
She's with Raindrops and Bubblecup somewhere above.
Twilight quirked a brow.
Bubblecup?
I'll explain on the way,
said the teacher. As the five of them headed for the lake, they filled each other in on what they'd experienced since leaving Ponyville. By now they'd all seen just how dangerous this unknown entity was, and what it was capable of doing to otherwise good ponies. Big Macintosh cleaned himself up in a hurry, listening as everyone else spoke, and only adding a word or two when it was needed. Too anxious was he to see his baby sister that he couldn't bring himself to participate in conversation too much.
Raindrops!
Twilight called when Big Mac gave her the okay.
You guys can come down now!
The two Pegasi descended quickly, and before they were even to the ground, Applebloom jumped from Bubblecup's back and ran to her brother, happy tears in her eyes. He caught her up in his strong embrace and nuzzled the side of her face.
Shh, it's all right,
he muttered in her ear as she sobbed.
I'm here now. Ain't no pony gonna hurt you.
The others looked on, misty-eyed. Each one of them had friends and family they longed to find and reunite with, but it was so sweet to see this one reunion. Eventually, it was Cheerily who cleared her throat.
We need to make camp soon.
The sun had already disappeared, and the moon hung high and clear above them. There was plenty of light to keep going, but she wasn't sure what the best plan of action would be. For that, she looked to Big Macintosh. With Applebloom planted firmly on his back, he stood to survey the area. Down a bit farther east, the lake ran up against the mountainside. If they could get that far, it would be a better place to stay for the night. With the tall, solid rock at their back, they couldn't be surprised from behind. With the lake in front of them and ultimately on the right side of them, there was only one way anyone could approach. That was the safest bet. So the weary troop marched on in search of the place where the grass ended and the water met the mountain. Along the way, the unicorns gathered dry sticks and branches that would be used for a fire once all were settled. Rocks were rolled up from the water to form a stone circle, while Big Macintosh and the Pegasi worked on a makeshift canopy of thick branches with fat green leaves. Under their shelter, they all stared at the fire and huddled together. Big Macintosh offered to take the first watch, but none of them would let him. It was finally decided that Twilight and Bubblecup would take the first shift, and they would wake Raindrops and Cheerily when they could stay awake no longer. With stars sparkling overhead, everyone else settled in and closed their eyes, praying to wake up and discover that this had all been some terrible nightmare.